Greetings everyone and welcome back to a whole month of 365 Days of Prog. That is correct, we have been doing this thing for a month now. Those have been a great 30-day span. I really had fun doing this until now and I'm really hoping forward we will do this and do this more and it's gonna be so fun. But for now, I guess we should move on to the video. But beforehand, I want to tell you all that I've opened a Patreon page and I think it's pretty cool and you can go check it out. There's some cool perks on there. You can actually donate to change the channel banner, which is really cool, and you can suggest albums for a live stream, or you can even suggest an album that I will review in a week's time from now. Yeah, that's true. So you should go and check that out and see if that's something you're interested in. And of course, just you being here and seeing this album is a lot of support for me, and I'm really thankful for it. But I'm sorry for rambling, I'm really sorry. Today we will be reviewing the album K.A. by Magma, the first Magma album on this channel.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
So I've listened to this album. It's a really interesting wild ride, but I don't want to say anything else because I want to let you experience some of it. So here are, as always, my favorite bits of this album. Called K.A., which stands for Cortan Cause Ontaria, or I think that's how you say it. And this is, as I said, the first Magma album I'm listening to, and I am partially pleased. So of course, the only reference point I had before getting into this type of music is what we've listened to on Koenji Hayake's Hunger Shispa, which they are a band that inspired themselves off of Magma. They are known as the Japanese Magma, and they also do that Zool kind of singing and style of music playing. And I'd have to say that Koenji Hayake basically did what Magma did, but they were a lot more vigorous. So before I get into this album and the review, I think this album is really important to actually understand the lore behind it. So this album came out in 2004. Now if you know anything about Magma, you know that they are not like a new band in any way. They've been active since I think the 70s, even the late 60s. So what and why did this album come out in 2004? Well, apparently most of its subject matter was written back in 1973 and 1974, but it just didn't see the light of day until 2004, keeping Magma listeners on the verge of their seats all of these years and actually not knowing what is going to happen. Now, when I say not knowing what is going to happen, I actually mean it, because this album is a part of the lore that the Magma band have introduced to their listeners. So chronologically, this album is what comes right after the album called En Amendhet, I think, or Amendhet, I'm not really sure. But that album really tells about a pharaoh who seeks enlightenment during his life, and he is almost there on the verge of reaching it when he is murdered. And this K.A. album basically continues that story. It jumps ahead in time and it tells us about the archaeologist who discovered that pharaoh's tomb, and he reaches and he touches it, and then he sees the pharaoh's life and his journey and his quest to enlightenment, and then that archaeologist basically continues on that quest himself. Another thing, if you don't know, this album is almost entirely in Kobanian. Excuse me, I always make this mistake, it's actually Kobayan without the N. And understanding the plot of these albums, their music, is really hard because after all, it's not in a language that people know. I do know that it's a real language and there's actually a dictionary to translate it to French if I'm not mistaken. But as an average listener, it's pretty hard to actually understand what the subject matter is about. So my first criticism about this album is that the story itself isn't really well put through with the music, because there is no way I can understand the story when not understanding the language this album is in. But the music itself doesn't really give any context to it in my opinion, and I did not understand what this was all about. I had to research and actually see that this album had a story because I just didn't understand anything. But I guess I'm here to talk about the music itself more than the lore, so we should move on to that. Now, one thing I really like about the way they use Korean is the fact that it's not really used as normal lyrics are. They are not sung in a way which leads the listener to actually understand what they're saying, but it is used like an instrument in some way. Every phrase is repeated a lot of times, different pitches, and it sounds operatic in some way. And that gibberish they all speak is basically just enhancing the music, and it is a music because they actually use sort of a choir. They're not really a choir because they're singers and they're a part of the band. But I really like the fact that the language itself is used more as an instrument, as a backing vocal, than rather the solo. And that's kind of funny because I find a lot of resemblance to that of what is done on the Atom Heart Mother Suit. Now, if you don't know, that's my favorite album, so I'm kind of sitting on here, but I really love that album. And also in that song, they use like that gibberish in a way which really sounds like it has some meaning. So when it comes to the music on here itself, I think the first track is really good, and it is my absolute favorite off this album. And I find the second track and the third track to be going like a bit downhill. Now, I'm not saying in any way that this is a bad album. The music found on here is really good. It's really, you know, impressively good. Everyone's doing like a good job at what they're doing basically. All the instruments are going all out, and I think you can actually feel all the instruments. Nothing feels like it's overshadowed in the background. But I think my most major criticism towards this album has to come for the third track, the KA3, which this one is just not taking a break. I've never had time to think about it. I never really went ahead and thought about this, but music needs to sometimes take a break. Now, when you're dealing with a 22 minute long piece, I think breaks are really important, and this song just never takes one. It just goes all out, it's very hard hitting, and it's just overwhelming. The fact is that long songs, they need to have a change of motives. They have to have some sections which are quiet, they're somber, they're mellow, and they have to have some of those really energetic, hard hitting, fast tempo sections to actually contrast the two of them. Because this song, it is just full on energy drinks, all adrenalized, like, you know, as Wolfpack said, 20% faster, and I think that's just a lot to take in for so long. So although the music found on here is good, I just think this track was too much for me, and it's really odd because I never really thought about a song being too much for me, but this was just too much. Another thing, at the end of the second track, you can hear one word that you actually know, and that's hallelujah, and that was really cool. I thought it was like a nice thing. They added the hallelujah inside, and that was cool, and the track ended. But when we reached the third track, which, as I said, I didn't really like, hallelujah was used basically throughout the entire 4 minutes at the end, I think, as the only lyric, and that just kind of ruined everything for me in some way. I got sick of listening to them saying hallelujah and hallelujah and hallelujah again in different ways and different, you know, phrases. It just kind of took me off this world that they were building. There's no more Korean. It's just this one word repeated over and over and over again. Now, I know a lot of people like this album, but I think there is some section to it, which is the part where this album was in the making for so long and people were waiting for it for so long that in some way you just really have to like it because it's a part of Magma, and a lot of people love Magma and they love their other works, and I think that's understandable why a lot of people love this album. I might even like it more when I listen to it a few more times, But for now, it started off really good and it ended in a really annoying fashion, and that's why I don't really want to get back to it anytime soon. But don't get me wrong, I didn't suffer throughout this album. It was a good album, just not what I expected from my first Magma listen, but I know we have, I think, the MDK album coming up. I don't really remember which name it is, but I think their most critically acclaimed album is coming up pretty soon, so I'm really looking forward to that. But moving on to the cover itself, I think there's a lot to unpack over here because the lore itself really strikes a huge influence on this cover. So as you can see, there's the Magma logo on here and there's the name of the album below it, it's KA, and there's a lot of symbolism going on here, I think on two fronts. So the first one being, this album took shy of 30 years to actually come out to the public and everyone was waiting for it, whilst the music itself was basically written but just being, stored away in a shelf and not releasing to the public. Another thing is the fact that this subject matter of the album is talking about the archaeologist, and he goes and he finds some ruined things in the archaeology site, and I think those two, they really bond to what you can see on this cover. It resembles the long wait that the fans of Magma had to wait for this album to come out, and also gives you a bit of a glimpse into what's going to be found on this album. So yeah, their logo, deteriorated and run down, is really fitting for what's on here. And I know this is a photo, but I really like how they use colors on here. I think they're really pleasant, they're really nice to look at. I love this cover in a lot of ways because it has a lot of story behind it, but it also just really looks nice. But overall, I'd have to say that this album receives a very long overdue 7 out of 10. I might have sounded like I had a lot of bad criticism towards this album. That's because some parts of it were, but the music found on here is really good. It's really masterful and I cannot shy away from looking at that. So that's about it, guys, and we're gonna move on to a great band tomorrow because we're gonna listen to the first Jethro Tull found here, and because I've not listened to their entire discography because there's a lot of it, tomorrow we're gonna be listening to Stormwatch. But as always, I hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and I hope you all will have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.